Been looking at what a lot in the Christian world at this time of year have called Advent. And this is just the fourth lesson in this concept. I think it's very important this time of year. If that's what people are thinking of, use it. Satan doesn't give us many opportunities to enter into conversations where people are already thinking about things that the Bible does talk about. This Advent is a Latin term which translates a Greek word epiphany, which in English for us is an epiphany is when you get a good idea. They show it in cartoons where the light bulb clicks on. That's what the Greek word meant. It meant to arrive, either in mental thought or in actual physical presence. An event or a person is how the Latins used it for adventus. So the term is a theological term. It's not necessarily mentioned in Scripture, but it deals with when God arrived. And we did look back at Titus chapter 2, verses 11 through 14, where Paul is filling Titus in because you know Titus was Gentile. He did not have the scriptures and the teachings of Messiah. Paul was filling him in, and then, of course, he took that and ran with it. He was a great evangelist under the tutelage of the Apostle Paul. But he told Titus there that when Jesus arrived, everything changed. Nothing was the same. Nothing will ever be the same. And when you think about it, that's a good thing. People today that just want to stay where they are, I've been in places, ministry in places where they don't want to learn new things. They will never tell you that and admit to it, but when you try to teach them what the Bible really says, you get an argument. They don't like to think there's new things, but it's nice for us to open our minds, continue learning until the next Epiphany. Because Paul will say in Romans, we're living between two different great events of God's doing. In order to pay the price for sin, a human had to voluntarily give their life. What human was without sinful blemish in order to do it? Okay, at the time, before Christ came, there wasn't one. No human since has been able to do it. So God, and this is why the virgin birth is a very foundational doctrine in Christianity and our salvation. And Paul will say, if that didn't happen, then we of all people are most to be pitied. Because we're going around teaching that it did. We're frauds if it wasn't true. God became a human. Mary was used to provide the human side of Jesus. And it does bother me too. Didn't the prophecy say he was supposed to be called Emmanuel? Where did Jesus come from? Jesus is actually a Latinized translation of the Greek Jesus, which is the Greek Hellenistic translation of the Hebrew and Aramaic Yeshua. The J is pronounced as a Y. Joshua. And it's taken me a long time to figure out why the angel didn't command them to name him Yeshua. Any ideas? That's a big contradiction if we don't qualify it.
Too hard to remember?
Okay, it could be. You might be right.
I thought Emmanuel meant God with us.
Uh-huh.
And isn't that more of a descriptor than a title?
Yes, very good. Excellent, excellent. The name Yeshua means Yahweh. The Latin translation is Jehovah saves. That's what he came to do. Emmanuel means God as if he were sitting right here in this congregation with us, which he is. by the way. Well, he doesn't have to sit, does he? He's here. He's with us every moment of every day, everywhere we go, everything we do. Jesus as Emmanuel, that's who he was, his identity. As Yeshua, that's what he came to do. So that is how I've been able to join the two together. Well, his first Epiphany, how many people witnessed it? Good trivia question I've asked before. You probably know the answer now. Why did Mary and Joseph ever go to Bethlehem? I mean, Joseph's got a good business up in Nazareth. Why did they travel all that way? And they would have traveled with family, by the way, and not like in the pictures where they're alone and she's on the back of a donkey. She could have been in a cart. I mean, she's 9 months pregnant. That would have been a very bouncy ride, wouldn't it? Why did they even go to Bethlehem? To be counted. The Romans, why did they enact a census? Money.
Keep track of people.
And it was then required that they go back to their ancestral home. So Joseph was from the house, a family of David. And if Luke's genealogy, you notice it's different names from David to Jesus. But from David to Abraham, exactly the same. Leading many to believe that is Mary's genealogy. So no matter if you trace him through supposed father, like the Jewish people would, so Matthew, being written to a Jewish audience, listed him as coming through Joseph. You can still go back to David and Abraham. And if you trace through Mary, whom he really was part of, you can still go back to David and Abraham. That's why it's such an important doctrine, and we should not shy away from it, especially at this time of year. There is no biblical subject that comes right out of Scriptures that should not be discussed any time of the year. And just because pagan ideas have been added on to it, okay, let's take that. Let's not reinvent the wheel. People are thinking about it. People are talking about it. Let's take it from there and let's move them toward the real reason for coming. Jesus was a great gift, but that wasn't the end of the story, was it? It was just the beginning. In order to pay the price for our sin, he had to be human. The writer of Hebrews tells us he was tempted every way we are, yet sinless. So think about every way you get tempted. Don't think it's disrespectful to think of Jesus in that way. He had to face it every way we do. And yet, to the 100th degree, because if he ever failed one time, it was all over. He had to do it perfectly to fulfill all the Scriptures. So at this time of year, Advent, it's the time period leading up to the birth of Christ. It has just been thought to have been December 25th, which there are clues in the story that it was not winter. Shepherds would not have been out in the field. The governor would not have called everybody to travel to their ancestral home in the winter. And when they got to town, the place was full, wasn't it? The innkeeper was not being mean and nasty. He might have been fed up with all the crowds of people there. There was no place. So they took shelter in a barn. So like my grandmother, after I'd left the door open and the lights on, just, what, were you born in a barn? Jesus could have said, yeah, I was actually. He was laid in a feeding trough. How many people noticed? If God hadn't stepped in, maybe I'd qualify it that. How many people would have noticed? 0. Only the family that had the angel visits. And of course, you believe every angel visit that people talk about, don't you? Oh, that's the Holy Spirit thing. Right, sure. She came back from visiting their relative who was 6 months pregnant. She stayed 3 months, and when she came back, smuggling a basketball, Holy Spirit, okay, that's cool, great miracle, wonderful, right? That's why Joseph was told, do not be afraid to take her as your wife. Talks about his faith too, doesn't it? And they lived in a small town where there are no secrets. Why do you think the townsfolk were so angry with him and tried to kill him when he claimed he was Messiah? They knew the parents. They knew the brothers and sisters. But you know that underlying that, they also knew they couldn't wait for the wedding. See, a human wouldn't write that story, would they? If you want the rest of the world to believe a story, that's not the one you would write, which actually adds credence to it. So the Epiphany, the arrival, the showing up of God as a human, is a very foundational doctrine. Because the blood of bulls and goats do not take away sin. Humans sin. A human has to pay the price. What human was perfect enough? Jesus had to voluntarily offer it. He couldn't have been commanded to. That would not have been the perfect sacrifice. He chose it. And he said so many times, he's laying down his own life by his own choice. If that wasn't true, then we were not saved. It's amazing what Jesus had to go through. And we have a memorial just to remember that. And the Hebrew word for remember doesn't mean to think back on a former idea. It means actually put yourself in the story. So when we eat the bread, we remember his physical presence with us. When we drink the blood, we remember the life-giving that he gave. And actually, the New Testament church, in all of their histories, talk about this time as a celebration. They didn't sit there somber, feeling guilty. God did not ask us to eat the Lord's Supper and think, see what you made me do. But you know, that's what I was always taught. The New Testament church called it the love feast. Read 2 Peter, read Jude. They celebrated because Jesus isn't dead, is he? So Paul will say we're living between two appearances because Jesus arrived and paid the price for sin according to the scriptures. It was all planned. And I went over all the different preparations. Well, not all of them. There's too many to count. Fulfilled prophecies where God planned it exactly that way. And if you read through the gospel accounts, you can see how Satan tried to stop it from happening. Satan did not want Jesus crucified because that fulfilled the scriptures. Didn't want it done on the Passover. Remember, the Jewish leaders got together, decided to kill him. Let's wait till after the feast. No. Jesus had to make that happen when you read the gospel accounts, because that's what was prophesied. Satan tried to stop it by having the tomb guarded and sealed. How well did he do with that plan? The guards ran into town, had to be paid to admit they were sleeping. And if you're sleeping, how do you know who came and stole the body? Give me a break. These are grown men. You can come up with something better than that, can't you? All right. If God hadn't stepped in, that first Epiphany would have gone totally unnoticed. 2 old people in the temple. Tap on the shoulder from God. How he did it, don't know. That's the guy you've been waiting for. I promised you you'd live until that day. And they went out and prophesied, and Simeon's prophecy wasn't all that good, was it? Looks Mary in the eye and says, the sword's going to pierce your soul too. Totally opposite of everything they had always been taught. That's why when Jesus was right in front of them, they wanted to kill him. Not to further his cause, but to get him out of there because he wasn't the Messiah they wanted. So Paul says we're living between the times. We're here already, but not yet. So now we understand there's not just one showing up. There's another one. How many will be ready for the next one? Is that a good question to ask yourself every day? This is the final epiphany of Jesus, as I call it today. There is a modern philosophy that is going around among Christian circles that Jesus failed, got himself killed, and established the church as plan B so that we have a whole bunch more people ready for when he does return the next time, he'll be able to establish a throne on earth. See, Satan distorted the scriptures in the minds of the people the first time, thinking they were going to get an earthly king. Jesus says, my kingdom's not of this world. So in their mind, he failed. He didn't understand his mission. That's what humans come up with, isn't it? What do you think about a God who fails? I appreciate the first song that Bob led today. He is able to deliver you. Thank you, Bob. But a God who fails?
A God who fails is a little g God.
Thank you. Excellent. Jesus didn't understand his mission. Satan stopped it from happening. Satan is a defeated enemy. When Jesus died on the cross, his last word in Greek, one word, English takes three, it's finished. That was his last jab. It's done. Satan is a defeated enemy. He only has the power we give him. James says, if we stand against him, you don't have to do anything. Stand against him, what does he do? Call out all the forces against you? He flees. That word for flee is more than just running. It's running for sure. But it's running like a scared mini goat. That, we just don't see it that way though, do we? Our faith is to grow to that point, to understand it. When it does, then we will be ready for the next epiphany. The church age was actually prophesied. So those who claim that the church was put into place until Jesus could come back and finish his job, don't let Satan trick you into thinking that. That is not true. The study of the second coming is actually called in theological circles eschatology. Spell it E-S-C-H-A-T-O-L-O-G-Y. Eschatos is the Greek word for last or the end. And a logos is a discussion, a study. It's the study of last things. But don't let Satan get you thinking that there's another time coming for 1,000 years. Because there are so many scriptures that say these days we're living in now, these are the last days. When Jesus comes again, it's all over. But a lot of people will use the Old Testament prophecies about his first epiphany and apply it to the second one because they've been distorted to the point thinking that Jesus failed. But a God who fails in his mission is not much of a God that can save you. So let's not think that. And let's help people understand what's truly happening. On your outline, I know it's very busy. And each one of these was actually a lesson in grad school. I got 2 pages. So this would take a long time. So I'll leave a lot of this for you to read. The first indication that there was even going to be a second coming comes from Matthew chapter 12, Mark 13, and Luke 21. They all record the same discussion Jesus had with his disciples. But that Olivet Discourse, as it's called, because they were on the Mount of Olives. They were looking at the temple. They were so impressed with the architectural and the magnificence and the beauty. And Jesus says, yeah, take a look. Within most of your lifetimes, not one stone here is going to be left upon another. It's all going to be thrown down. That would be tantamount to you going to Washington, D.C. I'm putting this in American terms. Go to Washington, D.C., being so impressed with all the monuments and having someone tell you, yeah, before you die, you're going to watch all of this stuff wiped out. So when Jesus said that about the destruction of the temple, not his second coming, how do you think they felt? Remember, there was one time when that happened in their history and they were taken away into Babylon captivity. Not again. Surely, Jesus, you'll keep that from happening, won't you? Did he?
It looked like an attack on God himself.
Yes, because that was his throne in their eyes. When actually the inner room, what was in the inner room at that time? It was empty. He wasn't there. But they had put all of their faith, and we're guilty of this today too if we're not careful. All of their faith was in their worship, not in what their worship was supposed to bring them to and understand. God had to take that out of the way so they could direct their thoughts to the right person they're supposed to be worshiping. Not a building, not what we call a liturgy, or today we call it 5 acts. That's not what saves us. Jesus saves. The church is the collection of people who have been saved. And God puts us together. We don't vote on it. We don't decide who's in, who's out. We don't decide who we fellowship with. We're in a lifeboat. We're waiting for the rescue ship. And we need each other or we will die out on the ocean.
But it's not things.
It's not practices. That's why we're not saved by works.
With before.
Yeah. Yeah, they had worshipped their worship.
They
And they thought God could not take out his throne. And he did it before. And when they built the new one, they sat on the hillside and cried, wept like babies, those who remembered the first one. For 2 reasons. One, this one didn't look anything like Solomon's temple. It was a cinder block fishing hut, basically. But also the presence of God did not fill it. Same thing with Herod's temple. So they were thinking that Jesus would come, establish a physical throne. The disciples are still thinking this. And when he told them all of this is going to be wiped out, they think, well, then we fail? We lose? No. And there is a passage there. If your Bible, like mine, is red letters for when Jesus talks, then in that discussion, there's a section that's put in red letters. They're not supposed to be there. Jesus tells them, when you see the abomination that causes desolation, and then a hyphen, let the reader understand. That's not supposed to be in red letters. Jesus didn't say that. That's what Matthew, Mark, and Luke wrote. Because Jesus didn't have readers. He didn't write. He had listeners. But Matthew, Mark, and Luke had readers. And what he's telling them is go back to the prophecies in Daniel and read it before you move on here. He's talking to his readers. So that should be in black letters. I don't know why it bothers me. It does. But he's talking about the destruction of the temple in fulfillment of Daniel's prophecies. And it was just before that time where he prophesied that the anointed one will be cut off. And now, only one wall on an outer courtyard, not the temple itself, is left standing. And people worship that wall today. Now your body is the temple of the Holy Spirit. Okay, so you see why God had to take it out of the way, so they wouldn't continue to worship a building. Yeah. All right, Jesus then they asked two questions. When's this going to happen? And what are the signs of your coming? You can read that ahead if you want to. In Matthew chapter 24, verses 36 through 51, where Jesus says there's going to be wars. There's going to be rumors of wars, earthquakes, famines. But the end is not. That's just the beginning of the birth pains. We right now, if you watch the news in the evening, we have 2 wars raging in the world. We've never really been free from wars, have we? Because he's not talking about nation against nation, even though he mentions that. Kingdom means kingdom. He says, in your own homes, you're going to be having war. Fathers will deliver their children to death. Children will be delivering their parents. The members of your own household are going to be your enemies. And yet that's still not the end. You don't think it could get any worse, do you, when you watch what's going on? That's a wish. Because, oh yes, it can. And it has been. Yeah, but Jesus says, don't listen to people who claim, because they don't know what they're talking about. John chapter 14 is the first time Jesus mentioned it to his disciples as a discussion. John gives about 4 or 5 chapters on that last meal he had with the disciples. And in chapter 14, verses 1 through 3, Jesus says, I'm going away to prepare a place for you. And if I prepare a place, I will come back and take you to be with me. But they're still thinking physically. They're questioning, where's he going? Peter, I'll go with you. I don't want to stay here. Jesus says, where I'm going, you can't go yet. They were still thinking physical kingdom, weren't they? They still had no concept of a dying Messiah. They had no concept of a second coming. Because in their mind, the first one hadn't happened yet. Even though he was sitting right there with them. How many people will be ready when he comes again? In the book of Acts, chapter 1, this is the first time with the, with the help of the Holy Spirit, where they really got it, finally. Jesus ascended into heaven, and the angel appears to them. What are you doing looking up into the sky? Go on out, get busy. The way he just left, he's coming back again. What were the warning signs when he took off and left? So what are the warning signs when he comes back? But humans can't handle that, can they? And actually, when they asked Jesus after his resurrection, now you're going to restore the kingdom of heaven, now, he said, it's not for you to know. How arrogant is it for humans then to say, I can figure it out. Not too long ago, there was a guy who could not understand how people could not see how Jesus was right there, ready to come. People quit their jobs. You should have seen when we were in New York City over there. People were sitting around in the subway trying to get people to sit there and wait with them for Jesus to come. And after the day came and went, we have 2,000 years of wrong guesses. You'd think we'd get used to it and say, well, then we can't figure it out. Even when Jesus says, the Son doesn't know. I don't even know. Only God does. And he told his disciples, it's not for you to know. What we do know about the last day, it will be a singular event. It's not going to be many second comings. And that's what the philosophy that thinks his first mission failed teaches. He's going to come back and secretly steal people away. And then a certain time later, 3.5 years or so, he'll come back and get everybody else who's finally figured it out and made changes. And then he's going to be here for 1,000 years. I'm going to tell you, I don't want to be here another 1,000. And then he's going to come back, and then we go to heaven. You know what? Can we skip that 1,000 and just go there? And it's all based on the idea that he's got a physical kingdom. What a distortion. Satan is still winning that victory today. It will be one day. And the judgment, okay, and that is why I have verses for you there in Acts, 1 Corinthians, 1 Thessalonians, 2 Thessalonians, 2 Peter. We are living in the last days. Paul is saying the already, but not yet. We're living between two appearances, two epiphanies, two advents. Jesus says, so to his disciples, I'm coming soon. Okay, 2,000 years, is that soon?
Not for us.
Not for us, but on God's timing, he already knows the end. So for him, no problem. Like the game last night. My hometown team played on TV last night. On the edge of my seat. If I had known how it turned out, I probably wouldn't have stayed up. I would have gone to bed early. That's how God is. He knows the end. So for him, he's just waiting for everybody to get here that's going to get here. Isn't that good? He's waiting for me. Because he could have ended it a long time ago. But he's coming soon. The time is unknown to all but God the Father. He'll return like a thief in the night. Any of you been robbed? Do the thieves send you notice? Hey, go to the theater tonight. We're going to be there and we want your TV. Could you leave it on the front step? Do thieves announce they're coming? When do you know you got a thief in the house? After he's in the house. Okay. How many times does God have to say, I'm coming like a thief in the night? And we still think we can figure it out. No. There's going to be no clues, no hints, no warnings. There's 3 passages for you. And these others that I list here for you, 2 lines worth, these are the most important to the second coming. He expects you to be busy working when he returns. He does not need an escort. Just like the disciples looking up into the sky, waiting for him to come back, thinking he was like a yo-yo. No. You have a mission. He's given you a mission. Now, get out there. Do your work. Blessed is the servant whom his master finds working when he returns. We don't have to figure it out. We don't have to quit our jobs. We don't have to sit on a mountainside to escort him home. He does not need an escort. This is very offensive to me in my younger years. He really doesn't need me to do anything but what he's told me to do. Really? I don't get to lead the way and show people, see, I told you. No, he doesn't need that, does he? No. So there's a bunch of passages there to tell you. Just get ready, stay ready, keep working. That's what he wants when he's returning. It could be at any possible moment. In fact, every generation has expected him, and this generation had better get ready. Because he's going to come at a time you don't expect. It will startle you. It will bother you. But that doesn't mean you're not ready. No. It will be noisy, if you read 1 Thessalonians chapter 4, especially. Everyone will notice. Everyone will be personally involved. Not like the first one, where God had to step in with sent some angels over to sing for some shepherds. He had to send not three. They gave 3 gifts, didn't they? We don't know how many magi there were. Maybe put a star in the sky so that somebody would notice. Not the next time. It's going to be very noisy, and every eye will see it. No one's going to be off work. No one's going to be on vacation. No one's going to be asleep. Not going to be sick in the hospital. Every eye will see it. Every ear will hear it. Every knee will bow. Sequence of events. Jesus himself will come out of heaven with a loud command. Read the scriptures on what that sounded like to the people who heard it. You'd hope that you had earmuffs, because it will hurt your ears. The voice of the archangel saying, trumpet call of God. It doesn't sound like he's going to come secretly and steal people away, does it? No. The spirits of the dead who have died will be resuscitated and quickened. They will be gathered together. And if you look at the book of Revelation, when God sent out his angel to harvest the earth of all the faithful, he took one swing and it was done. God already knows where everybody belongs. Sent out his angel, and that was it. Are you ready? The spirits who are still alive then will be caught up with them, and we will be changed into a new body, one fit for the new resurrection. This body stays here. This body is made from this creation. All of our attempts to try to preserve bodies after death, the Egyptians were the best. Yet now that they're finding them today, when they open it up, what does it look like? Yeah. And the Romans and the Jews actually in the first century couldn't handle resurrection. The Pharisees and the Sadducees were fighting over it because their minds was like what we see on TV today for the Night of the Living Dead. But it's not this body. Paul says we get a new one, 1 Corinthians 15. It's going to be imperishable, so it won't die. It'll be glorious. There will be no handicaps because of our sin. It'll be powerful, but it will be made of the substance for the new creation that we're going to. Those who are unbelievers, you got to ask the question because we're not told what their body's going to be like. Judgment is taking place right now. There isn't a day for trial where you question and answer, where God tells you. No, on the day he comes, everyone will know where they belong. That word for judgment in the original language is to pass the final sentence. It's not time for a trial where you get to explain it and hope he changes his mind. That's going on right now. This is the tribulation. Your daily life is your trial. What will the outcome be? All right, everyone's going to be present. God's people are actually gathered first and held off together in a safe place. Everyone who has the mark on the forehead. They're gathered first before all the destructive things take place. Satan and his cohorts are held up on display as being defeated enemies and thrown out with the trash. The final destinations, don't get it wrong. Heaven is not necessarily a place, but it's total presence of being with God. That, to God, is heaven. Hell will be a place where God is not. Total absence of God. Even the unbelievers here still benefit from the blessings of God. There, it's a place of fire, and yet it's dark and cold and lonely, even though the majority of the people are going to go there. And it's really not designed for people. Heaven was made for Satan and his cohorts. Humans are going to be trespassers. Yet, for the individual there, what the Bible seems to describe is like you're in solitary confinement. So if you think it's going to be a big party with all your friends, or as one of the country songs used to say, if Mogan David ain't in heaven, who the H wants to go? It's going to be a big party, isn't it? Oh, Satan is so good at what he does. Satan is not in charge. He's the chief enemy, or prisoner. God is not there punishing people. He's not even there. The pain and the suffering are going to be self-inflicted because you had a chance and you blew it. And now there's no changing it. Heaven is anything that is intimate with God. The imagery is beauty, comfort, peace, not physical. I had an instructor in college, really bothered us when he said this in class, talking about streets of gold and the pearly gates. And he said, it's going to be beautiful. I'm going to enjoy the sights. That's all imagery is, isn't it? Well, if it's not beautiful like that, I don't want to be there. You're going to be upset with heaven? Some others who hold the philosophy that there's going to be a 1,000-year reign before going to heaven have said, and they've been on record by saying, if it's not going to be this way that I am teaching you today, I don't want to be there. Who is going to get to heaven and be disappointed? Okay, so it doesn't turn out the way I think it will. I'm still going to enjoy it. And I'm going to enjoy seeing you there too.
There's a country song that says something about the streets of gold.
Yeah.
Even if it was mud, I'd be happy to be there.
I don't need a mansion just over the hilltop. That's kind of selfish if you think about it. But I'm promised a spacious place, ornately decorated. But the best part of all, are we ready for this? Is I've got complete, total access with God in a loving relationship, not separated by my shame of what I've been doing. All of that's done for eternity. I'm looking forward to it. I hope you are, and I hope you're busy so that when Jesus comes again, you're ready, because you won't miss it. All right, we'll pick up a different study then next week.